Hey, welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe that high net worth individuals and those who help them struggle with clarifying capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy is the best way to defer tax and grow your wealth. I'm your host, Brett Swartz, and each episode I'm joined by some of the best financial independence and passive income wealth advisors in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration, so together we can make complex tax deferrals strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. I am thrilled to have our next guest. He is the managing member of Orbit Investments, and you can find him at orbitinvestments.com, and the host of the Forever Cash Flow Life podcast, and has vast experience in real estate, having negotiated, bought, sold, rehabbed, and as well as owned and managed over 3,800 properties. And he's done that all since 2002. Currently, he holds a large portfolio of properties in land, single-family, commercial, and multi-family properties. He and his wife, Michelle, they built the third largest land auction company, selling only their own properties in the United States. They also started a highly successful seven-figure real estate education company, which focuses on teaching what they've learned to others and how to invest into real estate. Last but not least, he's the best-selling author of the financial literacy book, Forever Cash Flow. Break the earn, spend cycle, take charge of your life, and build everlasting wealth. Please welcome Jack Bosch.
All right. Wow. Thank you very much for having me. That was quite an intro there. Thank you.
And thank you for being here. We look forward to diving in and sharing with our listeners your wisdom. So will you give us, our listeners, a little bit about yourself and your story, and then your current focus?
Right. So, okay, thank you. So first of all, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. So yes, I'm originally from Germany. As you can probably tell, I sound like Arnold, but I don't really look like him. So I came over here in 1997 to basically finish my college degree, and then did what my parents told me to do, which was get a good education, get a good job, like the traditional kind of rich dad, poor dad kind of message. And that's what I did. The only thing is, once I came here, I realized that I really wanted to stay here. I fell in love with the US, with that can-do attitude of the country, with like this pro-business kind of atmosphere here. And I also met this lovely girl. She's an immigrant herself from Honduras, Central America. And we fell in love with each other. And fast forward, we're married now 18 years. We're both citizens in the United States. We have a 12-year-old daughter. We happily ever after. And so after a few years, then I got a job. I was able to get a job with a work visa, that infamous H-1B visa that takes a while to get into the green card. And after a few years, this company let go of a bunch of people. Long story short is I kind of went through a process where I realized that while I wanted to be here, I didn't want to have a job anymore. I'm a hard worker, but I just having to be sent places and be afraid of losing your job and be afraid of all these things was just my cup of tea. I prepared all these years to school and college and think for just exactly that, just to realize that I kind of put my ladder against the wrong tree here, or against the wrong wall. So I tried to figure out what to do. We looked around at all kinds of different things, and we ended up with real estate. So I've been in real estate now since the end of 2002, dabbling prior to it with it for a couple of years, 2-3 years, trying to figure things out. And the method that we figured out is a method where we flip land that we can get for 5 to 25 cents on the dollar. So we figured out a method that we can get land usually be worth between $10,000 and $100,000 at 5 to 25 cents on the dollar. So we pay like almost nothing for these properties, and then we go flip them and we sell them for quick cash, or we sell them with seller financing, where somebody, let's say we pay $5,000 for a $40,000 property. Somebody gives us a $5,000 down payment, which means we got our money back, and then we get $500 a month for the next 10 years on that property. And that created beautiful, beautiful cash flow. But what it didn't create was any kind of tax benefits, because land has no depreciation. There's no rental income, nothing that you can write off as on land. As a matter of fact, even if you buy a commercial property, they first take off the value of the land, and then you write off the rest of it. So there's really nothing you can write off there. So as a result, we were paying quite a bit of taxes for a bunch of years. we said like, we said like, might have been stupid, but we said like, you know what, let's just keep paying what we do because we're making a ton, and let's just pay, because market prices around us was like 2005, 6, 7, 8 was so high that it kind of didn't make sense for us to buy something in the hopes it would go up the next day. And it certainly didn't make sense to buy something just for the tax benefits. So we just paid taxes, but then 2008 happened and the market started crashing. And we started realizing that now was the time that we could start shield some of that. So we started buying single families like crazy. We bought a whole bunch of portfolio, bought and sold a bunch. We currently own about 50 single family homes. And the nice part about this, they help with depreciation. And then we realized that we really need to step it up one level more. And what we are now doing, in addition to the land flips, we also do the land flips. We also teach the land flips. Now we have an educational business, as you mentioned, for the last 10, 11 years, where we have taught thousands of people how to also land flip around the country. Because there's no competition. There's 3,000 counties, and there might be like 500, 600 full-time people now doing that, and another 1,000 doing occasionally deal or here and there. But there's like over 3,000 counties. But then we started flipping. We started also buying and syndicating large apartment complex deals. So currently, right now, and that's what I'm spending a little bit more of my time on. We have a team for the land flipping. We have a team for the education, and the apartment side is something that I'm mostly involved with, also with a small team of only a couple of people. And like, for example, we have 158 units under contract right now. We're doing the cost segregation studies and all this kind of stuff in order to maximize the tax benefits and, of course, get extra cash.
Wow, what a great summary. So from land flips to educational business to apartment syndications, you mentioned in the beginning your why behind starting into the real estate business was not being dependent on others, right? Maybe having some fear or anxiety associated with being dependent upon someone else paying your paycheck, right? And or trading just the time for dollars, where you go, I would like to do other things with my time and energy. And so you made that shift. Now, was there a moment in time, Jack, where you were between, two jobs and real estate was this, the side hustle on the side, or at what point did you say, okay, we've got to burn the ships and go all in on real estate?
Yeah, so my situation was such that I actually couldn't burn the ships, because when you're on an H-1B visa, it's tied to the company you work for. So literally in my passport, there was a visa, a page, and a visa stamp in there, actually like a sticker in there, that basically said that I'm on an H-1B visa tied to that company I work for. So if you lose that job or if you quit, you have 60 days to find another job that they sponsor another visa, or you have to leave the country.
60 days, or you have to leave the country. So the pressure. And how old are you at the point when this is happening? What
20. I was an eternal student. I was 27 or something like that.
27. And you weren't married at this time, or you just kind of still single?
I was not yet married. I just had met Michelle, and we did get married during the green card process, and then we were able to add her to my green card because she was an immigrant too.
Sure.
And then we were able to add her to my visa process and green card process. We both had jobs and so on. And
but still, you're both under the pressure to keep the jobs, the H-1B visa. And so not only is it, I'm dependent for the income, but you're literally dependent to stay inside the United States. Otherwise, you got to go back to Germany and her back to Honduras.
Exactly. So what we ended up deciding is that there was a moment in time, and that was when this company let go of 1,000 people in one day. And they only had 7,000 people, so that's like a seventh of the group. And then they did that 2 more times over in the same year. So they let go of 1,000 people. 6 months later, another 1,000 people. 6 months later, another 1,000 people. And the first time that happened, I was in an office, cubicles around, and literally 3 people in that office were just popped out with a phone call. Because our manager, the original manager, was sitting in another location. So he just called them, said, I'm horribly sorry, we got to let you go. And then basically security guy came and escorted them out with their proverbial cardboard box like you see it in the movies. And coming from Germany, where the laws are completely different and much more labor friendly, much more employee friendly, good or bad, it's just what it is. I was just, my chin went down and I was like staring at the phone all day, just praying it wouldn't ring. Right? And that's when I've realized that I just can't rely on a job. It's just like, if that, my mind was like, I just worked and studied. I went for 6 years to college. I did an undergrad, did a master's. I spent forever doing that time, doing the thing, and spent a lot of money. And it's like, for that can't be it. That's like, I don't want to spend the next 30 years, 40 years, just every year, every economic dip, every economic thing, like fearing for my job and for my livelihood. Plus, I had 2 weeks vacation. I was making like net $2,600 a month. I mean, after mortgage, after car payments, we had $500 left to live on. And it's like, that's not the American dream. I didn't go to college for 8 years and have this fancy master's and everything to like make like no money, have no time, no vacation. I worked 60 hours a week, and it's just like, this is not it. So, but I have
so
no
you're able to clearly define what it wasn't. So that process was dependent. It can't be dependent on somebody else. Can't trade all these 60 hours for you know, a modest income. There's got to be something more. And on top of that, there's the anxiety and the fear that if I don't get another job within a certain period of time, the H-1B visa can expire, and then I'm out of all of the hard work that I've invested the last 6 years of getting my master's, going to school, and all of this. So I imagine your why or your motivation was pretty big. Maybe share with us a little bit about that, and maybe for, especially being from Germany and your wife from Honduras, the level of you know, I guess Americans, we take it for granted, right? If we're just born here, right? And we were original citizens. You know, share a little bit about how that propelled you forward.
Yeah. So the first thing is I'm typically not a person that worries a whole lot about tomorrow. I'm pretty spontaneous, and if you suggest tomorrow, let's go on a safari tomorrow, it's like, let's go, right? So it's like, no, to a degree. I mean, I'm also research oriented and things. So in this case, I was like, well, I mean, the worst case happens. We have to figure out as a couple where to go. Like, I didn't want to bring her to Germany because that's a huge change. I didn't want to personally go to Honduras. So even though I do speak Spanish, so it's like but it's a different climate, different environment, different everything. So we both feel well here. We both like it here. We both love the US. So let's figure out the way to stay here. That was kind of the biggest reason. And then, so what it did.
Hold on, let's pause there. So not only did you have don't want to go back to my home country, don't want to give up the 6 years I've invested in my education and work and the American dream, but then don't want to, you know, I have an opportunity to marry the woman of my dreams, right? And keep the love, everything together in America. So you kind of had the triple, I call it the triple threat, or the triple motivation to make this work.
Yeah. So I looked at it from a point of view, it's like, okay, we got to do something. So the first thing I did is I had not lost my job. So I was just afraid of losing my job. And lots of people in the company, about, 35% were losing their jobs. But I was like, okay, if I need to do whatever it freaking takes to not lose that job and make it to the point where I get the green card. I calculated the green card was probably about 2 years away. So I needed to kind of figure out 2 years. So I doubled up at work. If I was working 60 hours before, I was working 80 now. If I was volunteering for stuff. I was writing up reports and things and making sure anyone needed something. I tried to make myself become the best employee that I could ever possibly be, right?
Yes.
In order to minimize the risk of being fired. But then at the same time, I realized that this is not what we're going to do forever. So I needed to find plan B. So the risk of being fired, I thought after a while was a little lower because, as I said, I was 100% utilized. I was on a consulting basis. So I was like volunteering. I was helping other people. Even if I was not on the customer side, I was helping with writing up reports of projects and helping my sales guys do sales presentations and whatever had come up, so that they were basically, when the word got around who needs to be cut, it would be like, not Jack, we love him, right? So that's kind of the one thing I did. You
went back to working on yourself, working harder at your job, and making sure you became so valuable to the company that you'd be last on the list. And you had that 2-year goal. You said, okay, if I can last for 2 years, that is my goal.
Then I can go freaking work at McDonald's or Starbucks and pay the bills if I need to bridge some gap. But until I have that green card, I need to be with that company, because it was the dot-com bubble burst recession in 2001, and in the technology field, nobody was hiring. So I knew if I lose that, I won't find another job. And
where are you living, by the way, at this point? What part of the U.S.?
At that point, we had just moved to Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix, Arizona. Okay.
Where we still live. I'm still in Phoenix, Arizona. We fell in love with Phoenix too. After one winter, we're like 65 degrees, sunshine winter. We're not moving.
I'll take the heat in the summers, no problem. If these winters are like this, yes.
Yeah, now that we have freedom in our life, now we take the summer, we take entire June and July and leave and go to Hawaii, go to Europe, go other places, escape the heat. So then we come back, we have like a month and a half of heat, and then we have paradise again for the rest of the year.
Yes, but because you worked so hard and you sacrificed in the beginning in your mid-20s, that enabled you to be where you can travel to Hawaii and take the summers off and do those things. So let's dig into that a little bit more. I'm curious, when did you become fascinated and obsessed with kind of owning real estate? Obviously, this is a part of it, right? Not being dependent, but even before that, before your success as an author, as an educator, as a real estate investor, who was Jack growing up? I'm talking about the earlier years. And what gifts were you given? I'm curious. What gifts were you given, and how do they shape how you help others today?
Well, my dad is a teacher. So from a teaching, the education part of it, I must 100% say must come from him. He's the eternal teacher. He loves teaching you even now. He loves telling stories and anything. He's a walking encyclopedia. So when I know something, I was like that, and he goes into this long story and explains me something that my wife says I'm the same way. So, but growing up, actually, interestingly, I would never wanted to have my own business. I was not the guy having the lemonade stands. I was not the guy flipping something, selling something on campus or something on school. I was this more or less more quiet, bookworm kind of guy. I wasn't good in school. I was only B's and C's, but I had fun. Let's say I would like to go out and party and stuff like that. But at home, I would just grab a book and I would just read. My dad has a big library, so I would just go into his office, go grab a book, and I just read the really weird books like that, really perhaps a little too old for a 15-year-old to read, and more like, that's kind of what I did. And then perhaps on the weekends I would go out for a drink with my friends. Drinking age in Germany is 16, right? So as soon as we hit 16, we could have a beer somewhere.
That sounds like fun.
And school in Germany ends a little earlier, so they don't have they're a little bit shorter classes, so therefore they pack 6 classes into a morning, and by 1 p.m. you're out. And then, so we did homework, and then I was growing up in a small town. I would take the bicycle, go see friends, and come home at dinner time, and basically, but never thinking about it. Even in college days, I was never the guy organizing a party with and doing things that with anything having to do with business. Like, even though I did study business, I studied business from an employee's point of view. Also, really, no one in my family is an entrepreneur. Only my brother started about the same time we started. Having his own business. He's a financial planner, now a financial mortgage broker.
So not your typical entrepreneurial story where, right, you're starting the business as a young person, you're in sales, you're the extrovert, you're all those things that maybe someone might think would be the traditional business owner or entrepreneur. You were not that, and that's okay. Well, how has that helped shaped how you're a better business owner today, or what part of that gift that you were given is helping you to help others who perhaps didn't have a similar background too, right? Is that maybe there's a connection there? I'm trying to see, right?
I think the one connection I see is that because I wouldn't say I'm introverted, and I wouldn't say I'm completely extroverted. If you see me at a party, you might think I'm extroverted, but it's kind of I need both. So, and for example, one thing I don't enjoy doing is being on the phone. So when we figured out our, and in long meetings and stuff like that, long meetings are a big waste of time. Our company has now 25 people, and we have 1 meeting a week for an hour. That's it. But other than that, what really, the one thing is that I always think about ways in a way that I'm let's put it that way. I'm eternally lazy. So what that means though is I'm willing to work hard for a short time in order to then be able to be lazy long term.
Double time now for half time later.
Exactly. So I'm so lazy that I'm saying like, okay, if I have to work on a job 60 hours a week for the rest of my life, no. I'd rather work 80 hours for 5 years or 60 hours for 5 years on something that puts the money thing that basically gets the money thing out of the way, and then I can live the life I want to live for the rest of my life. So that's one thing. And then the other part is because I'm like, I have this perhaps a few tendencies of like, I don't want to be on the phone. I don't want to really talk to people all day long. We design our businesses such that they fit our lifestyle. So I was never the kind of guy in real estate that goes, sits down with somebody at the kitchen table and convinces them to sell their property to me. That's like my biggest nightmare. Like what the house flippers are kind of doing, that they're going meeting there and setting appointments and using all these kind of whatever sales tricks and things like that to convince them to drop the price. I have never done that in my life, period. And I don't want to. Instead, we devised a method. Therefore, as we got into real estate and as we found land, we devised a method that we can do virtually. So I don't have to get in the car and look at stuff, right? Because it's land. You can use Google Earth and Google Maps. That you can do without talking to anyone, because we can send out letters to the owners, and yes, they call us back, but we can pass it on to a call center. And then we send them an offer in writing, and they accept it in writing. And then we work per email. So my communication thing is, I'm an email guy. My phone, if I have 1 or 2 phone calls a day, that's a lot, right? So it's like, so I design our business such that also it's done on one day we do this, on this day we do with that. And so it's some structures in there. Perhaps that's my German in me, I don't know, or perhaps in my wife. And because of that, it's replicable, and it's also a business that allows us to be at my daughter's school for plays and at all the different things we want to be, and do this business when we block off time for it. So the business doesn't run us, we run the business. And that is something that I think comes from the upbringing of basically saying like, well, if I'm lazy, I want to schedule in time to be lazy. I don't want to have no appointments before 9 a.m. Right? And period. And I have no appointments after 4:30 p.m. And that's how I just love designing my life, that I don't have to be stressed out by certain things.
Yeah. So you got to know yourself and how you best work and how you best have energy and connect. Sometimes it's the introvert, sometimes the extrovert, but putting systems in place and disciplines in place where maybe you batch everything together, you take only a certain amount of calls per day. All those things help to add to your energy versus taking away, and helps you become more efficient. Plus, you don't waste a bunch of time in endless meetings for your team. You do one meeting a week for 1 hour, and it's very structured, consistent, and you're moving on. Thank you for sharing that. Let's shift a little bit, Jack.
Sure.
Will you give our listeners an example of how your service helps others create and preserve more wealth? But in particular, how does it help reduce, defer, and or eliminate capital gains tax?
All right. So our land flipping obviously doesn't do that, because we teach it. People are very successful. They create 6 figures. Some people, we have quite a few now that actually are a growing amount of people that have generated 7 figures of wealth in their life because of the land flipping, right? Our mission is to create 1,000 millionaires with our teachings. So, however, what the land flipping does not do is give any tax benefits, because as I mentioned, land is it doesn't do it. But therefore, you can make 500% returns on your money, and then you just pay some in taxes, and then you still make a 300% return. We always looked at that as like, okay, but that's kind of the old thinking. The service that we offer is when we do apartment complexes, is that we do work with investors. However, currently we do what's called 5 or 6B syndications, where we cannot take anyone we don't already have a pre-existing relationship with. So therefore, this is not an advertising for this. You can go to Orbit Investments. You can check out what we do overall, and if you want to get in contact with us, people can do that. But there needs to be. We can't just take a bunch of investors, and we have a bunch of investors. But what we have done is, the people who have learned from us land flipping, a lot of them are now making so much money that when we syndicate an apartment complex, we often work with them as our investors, because we already know them. They're already friends of us. They're already celebrating life. They already quit their jobs. They're already making good money. So when we syndicate the deals, what we do is we buy, let's say right now we're buying an 158 unit apartment complex for $5.3 million.
Excellent. Where are you buying that at, by the way?
In Oklahoma City.
Excellent. What's the curious cap rate, cash on cash return? Can you share a little bit with the listeners there?
Sure. This is a little bit of a different deal. It's like basically only 70% occupied. So the cap rate is not very high when we're buying it. It's actually very, very low. But we're buying it only there's 2 ways to buy multifamily properties in my mind. One of them is cap rate. If it's like mostly occupied, then cap rate is a very good way to go by, and obviously the best way. The other way is if the property is mismanaged, which this one is and has been for the last 5 years, and it only has like in what's called an economic vacant occupancy of 50%, basically 70% occupied and 20% are like delinquent on their rent. You can't go by cap rate because otherwise you would buy this thing at a 1.5 cap rate, right? But you go by door by price per door. And if I can see that stabilized properties in that market, let's say, sell for, let's just pick a number, $50,000 a unit, and we can buy ours for $33,000 a door, and we put $5,000 per unit in repairs and upgrades into that, we're going to be at $38,000 per property, and we can go sell this property at $50,000 a door. Then we're making a tremendous profit. And if also in a stabilized position, we run forecasts that at that point, it throws off about like cash on cash. How do you calculate it? Based on full purchase price or based on invested amount?
I think usually what we do is just your total investment you're putting in, right? And it's going to be divided by the annualized cash flow. So, or another way to put it is your net operating income divided by the purchase price is going to give you your cap rate, which is your unleveraged rate of return, as if you bought it all cash and let's say it was 6%. But then you would take whatever the debt service is after you minus the debt service, then you would use that as you divide those two and get the cash on cash return.
Absolutely. So yeah, so we're calculating it a similar way, and our stabilized cash on cash return at that point is going to be about 18 to 20%. So excellent. That's a pretty good number at that point. And then our investors obviously get a portion of that. We get a portion of it. And then usually we do about the 3 to 5 year horizon and we sell it. And in the particular tax strategy we use for that is obviously you can write this thing off for 27.5 years. But what you can also do is we can do what's called a cost segregation study. And I'm sure you're familiar with those, but
share because our listeners can hear because this is important.
Yeah, but they're particularly interesting since Donald Trump did the new tax rules in place. So it was always the case that you take an apartment complex or any commercial property and depreciate it over 27.5 years. But within that apartment complex, there's items that you can depreciate for 15 years, over 15 years, over 10 years, and over 5 years. I think there might be some 7 years in there, but I think it's 15, 10, and 5. Bottom line is there's like refrigerators, there's kitchen cabinets, there's doors, there's toilet bowls, there's sinks, there's faucets, there's ceiling fans, there's air conditioned units. There's all these different things that typically don't last as long as the brick and mortar of the actual building. So in the past, you would identify, you can hire a company that does what's called a cost segregation study, and they separate out what are these items that you can depreciate quicker, and what is the piece that you have to depreciate over the 27.5 years. So up till Donald Trump changed the laws with the tax reform, you had to basically then identify, well, this portion you'd write off over 15 years, this one over 7 to 10 years, this one over 5 years. Well, in the new tax laws, we have a window of time that'll change about 2024. So between like a year or two ago and to year 2024, I believe it's 2024, don't pin me down on it, is you can actually take all that 5, 10, and 15 year stuff and write it off in the very first year of ownership, even if you buy that property on December 31st of a year. So in other years, even if we're buying a property like December 31st, 2019, we can take, usually it ends up about 25% of the actual building value. So in this case, if this is a $5.3 million purchase, let's say the land is worth 20%, the land is worth $1 million, we're at, let's say $4.3 million left over, about 25%, which is, let's say $1.1 million is that chattel stuff, as it's also called, chattel, and that you can write off in the very first year. So that means that if you're a real estate professional, which obviously we are, then, and let's say we would do this deal without any investors, then we would put up the $1.5 million that it takes to get into that deal. And then, but let's say from our other incomes, from real estate, from education, from whatever it is, from our land flips, we have $1 million, $1.1 million in income in that year. Then purchasing this deal wipes out our entire tax liability for that year. So we are basically, you can literally shield up to $1.1 million of income. Now, the way we work is that our investors get a portion of that, we get a portion of that. So we only get a smaller part, but the investors also, if they invest on December 31st on that deal, or they put the money in 2-3 days before, and then we close on December 31st, they haven't received any cash flow yet, but they right away receive like approximately a 30-40% tax benefit that they can use against other capital gains or other income from investments in that same year. So right there is some massive tax savings that are going on. And obviously we are using that actively. We're searching out these properties that are going to have a great cash on cash return. So they're cash flow positive, they're good deals, but of course they're also helping us shield our income taxes in a massive way.
That's phenomenal. And let me just clarify. So the 18 to 20% cash on cash does not include the cost segregation, accelerated depreciation, or it does?
Does not include.
Right. So that's just above and beyond it. And just for our listeners, just to kind of recap here. So what he's saying is cost segregation is a powerful way to eliminate and or get rid of any additional income or capital gains tax from other investments by doing an accelerated depreciation schedule. Now, digging a little bit more into this, when do you pay the tax on that $5.4 million deal, of which you just took 1.1, let's say, in the cost seg? Can you walk through if and when you would pay that tax, or how are you going to defer that in the future?
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's too good to be true, right? That you all of a sudden shield off $1 million and $1.1 million in taxes or so, or whatever the portion is. But ultimately, the government wants their piece. So when you hold this property now for several years, you go sell it. And again, I'm not a CPA, but that's what my my understanding is. When you sell the property, all of that depreciation is recaptured because the building is still standing there, right? The cabinets are still in the kitchen, the air conditioners are still working, the refrigerators are still there, and yet it might have been replaced and you get additional depreciation. But all of that stuff now comes back and is being recaptured, and you pay taxes on it at that point of time. Now, the nice part is, from my understanding, again, I'm not a CPA, is however, when you pay the taxes on it, you then pay the taxes on it as a long-term capital gains rate. So versus before, you pay on the actual active income tax rate. So if I'm a high income earner, let's say, and I have the 37% income state tax rate plus state tax rate, I live in Arizona, it's another 4.32%. So I have a 42% marginal tax rate that I end up paying. Well, by holding it for a few years and then reporting the income, I only pay a 25% tax on it. So right there, I have a 16-17% savings in taxes by just doing that. But then, of course, what else can you do? You can do a 1031 exchange at that point. You can take the property, do a 1031 exchange, or you can do the trust kind of piece that you do, right? And
correct.
And
just for our listeners to touch on that. So you buy a property, you do an accelerated depreciation to start. The first 20% of the land is going to be probably cut out from the value. They're just going to do it on the additional part of that. You're going to get about 25% of that value, which you can accelerate in year one. And then you can hold it for a number of years. My understanding on the nuances of this is you sort of want or need to hold it for the number of years that your lowest components were depreciated to for. So for example, let's say you accelerated it, a lot of it down to 5 years. Well, you should hold at least or greater than the 5 years. Now, that being said, you could do a 1031 exchange at that point, buy another property and defer it again, and or you can do a deferred sales trust at that point. And what's really unique about the deferred sales trust is the ability to not only defer the capital gains tax, but then have what's called a new depreciation schedule, which you can buy the next property for, as opposed to the 1031 where the depreciation schedule travels, and therefore you don't have as much to offset or accelerate on that next deal. And that's the key, is to just, how do you get the maximum amount of depreciation to write off, which would offset your capital gains tax or your income. And then the time value of money kicks in, where it states, okay, if I don't pay $100 today, and I can earn on that extra $100 over the next, let's say 10 years, and earn 7% on that $100 can double to $200. And so that's the idea, to continue to defer, continue to get new depreciation schedules, and then to earn interest off that. And the reason the government gives us these opportunities is because they actually want to incentivize people to build more buildings, to start more businesses, to create more jobs, which in the study of macroeconomics kicks in, which states if we can build more jobs and spur more economic growth and keep money flowing, it's actually going to bring more tax revenue in, and it's going to keep the economy strong. So these are legal loopholes to help incentivize investors and business owners to start more businesses and to create more jobs.
Absolutely. Beautifully said.
So we're going to shift a little bit. Maybe you could share one of the biggest mistakes wealth advisors make, okay? Because I know you work with not only your own partners, but you work with perhaps business professionals or real estate brokers. And I see part of your role is a wealth advisor's, not in the traditional financial advising sense, but really you're a financial advisor for real estate investment, commercial real estate, and all of the things we're talking about. So what do other wealth advisors, such as financial advisors, commercial real estate brokers, commercial real estate syndicators, business brokers, what are they missing, which they should or should be sharing with their clients or could be sharing with their clients? What's one thing that you would say, I wish they were sharing this?
So I wish they would be focused more on cash flow versus what I call the pile of money theory. And the pile of money theory is like the traditional, and you even see it on television advertising when the big financial brokerage firms, financial planning firms advertise. There's like one advertising that I remember that I don't watch much TV, that they're taking toilet paper rolls or something, or paper rolls, and rolling them out, and there's rings that have different ages of the people. And then basically it's like, do you know how much? And the roll of paper represents how much money they have, for how long do they have money in their lifetime. And some people's money runs out at 65, some people's money runs out at 90, some people's run out at 70, and so on. And I don't believe anyone's money should ever run out, because if you don't ever have to touch the principal, but you can live off the fruit of the principal, basically, then it's like the financial planners, and you guys are obviously different, but the most financial planners, they focus on just like, let's make that golden goose as fat as possible, and then let's go slaughter it and eat it and spread it over as many slices as we can until it's gone. Instead of just like, no, let's have as many golden geese as possible and live off the eggs for those eggs. For those geese are still going to be around when we no longer are around. For the best example is like my wife's dad passed away when she was 9 months old, right? And in his lifetime, he had done, he was an attorney in Honduras, but he did one thing. He did lots of things probably right, but one thing that made the biggest impact in my wife's life, which was that just a couple of years before she passed away, he sold some land that he owned, and funny, that was land, coincidentally. He sold some land, and he bought one income generating property. Not a huge thing, just something that throws off enough money to live off, let's say. And that property, 2 years before he died, he bought that property, and then he passed away. That property, right? That property is still in the ownership of now my wife. She owns it with her mom. And that property got her to school. Property got her into a private school, which don't cost that much, or as they cost over here. That property allowed her to be growing up bilingual. That property allowed her, they were able to, because it was free and clear after so much time, they were able to get a loan on it, which allowed her to come to the United States and go to college over here. And that property now, then, since we had a job when we started, that loan was paid back. And that property now supports her mom in retirement. And that property will still be around when our daughter is grown up and when we potentially no longer over here. I mean, how much better
Jack,
of an asset plan and a retirement plan can you build than that? But what all the financial plan, not most of the financial planners do, is they just like build it up, and then start drawing from it until it's hopefully there's something left by the time you pass away.
Right. It's the difference between building up the goose really fat and, like you said, slaughtering it, and then it's just going to be depleted eventually with time, or feeding the goose that lays the golden egg and put it into cash flow investment, passive income type of strategies that can then just pay you out that egg continually, and the goose never has to get slaughtered.
Right. Exactly. And the other thing, perhaps, if I may add on the second part, is that most financial planners are so focused on the stock market that they don't understand the power of leverage. It doesn't have to be aggressive leverage. I'm not a fan of aggressive leverage. We're extremely conservative. A lot of our houses we own, or almost all of them, we own free and clear. A lot of other properties only have like a 60% loan to value loans on them. If a bank says, no, I won't give you 80%, I'll only give you 70, it's like, yes, please, that's good, because I don't want over leverage myself. I want to work too hard for the assets we have to risk them. But leverage can be used in an amazingly positive way, and for cash flow and for those things, and to accelerate your wealth, and also to accelerate your cash on cash return, right? This property would only have, if I would have bought it full in cash, this $5.3 million property would only be producing about a 6% or 5 or 6% cash on cash return on an unleveraged basis. But because it's leveraged, it's at the 15 or plus percent, it's going to be at the 15 plus percent range. So you can do so much more with some leverage, and they just don't see it. They don't understand how real estate is actually a asset class that usually outperforms the stock market if you do it in the right way with the proper amount of leverage.
Well said. Yes, taking on smart debt versus risky debt or dumb debt, as long as you're not getting over leveraged and you have some real equity in that property, and perhaps even a value add story to add to it, then you reduce your risk. I love that. So we're going to finish with this question, Jack. So tell me, how do you stay centered in your values and encouraged?
So centered in my values, that's a good question. I actually have my values right here. These are core values of our company. So I see them every day when I walk in. We have them. We have, when our weekly meeting, at least once a month, I bring them up and I speak about them. We are a core values focused and centric company. So we live our life based on the core values. It's the only way, in my opinion, that you can live there without ever having to touch in a gray zone and ever having to be at risk of doing something the wrong way. So we just reinforce them all the time. We identified them in the first place. Most people don't know what they are, right? So we spent an effort, and it wasn't a 1 hour effort. It took us half a year of digging deeper and deeper, and then shaving off another layer and another layer and another layer until we truly came to our true core values and what we stand for. And then you give yourself permission to live them. And even though sometimes it's the uncomfortable choice of walking away from something, saying no to an opportunity, letting somebody go in your company. But if we don't live them, but the moment you live them, you become magnetic for the people that share those values, and you become repulsive for the people who don't share those values. And life becomes very easy at that point, because you just don't have to think about whether something should be done or not. It's either a clear yes, or it's a clear no.
That is some really amazing wisdom, Jack. And well, I want to thank you for being on the show and sharing with our listeners your story and your amazing journey from Germany, and your wife from Honduras, and how you're living the American dream and you're helping others do the same. So it has been just an absolute treat. I want to thank our listeners again for listening again to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. I hope you gained some value from Jack's sharing of the cost segregation and the 1031 exchange, and also a plug for the deferred sales trust too. And here's the key: not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy is the best way to defer tax and grow your wealth. Thanks again, Jack, for being on the show. And you can find him at orbitinvestments.com. That's orbitinvestments.com.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Take care.